As an architect, I was used to designing spaces, crafting structures to embody harmony and purpose. But here I was, unexpectedly, in the role of a bride, envisioning my wedding as the most meticulously crafted day of my life. Each detail, from the floral arrangements to the curated playlists, had been planned down to perfection. In my mind, it would unfold like a scene from a romance novel, a celebration where love triumphs over all. My fiancé, Tyler, an engineer with a logical mind that perfectly complemented my creativity, waited for me at the altar. His usual steady smile seemed tense, as if he was carrying an invisible weight. As I walked in the aisle, a sense of unease crept over me. Tyler's gaze held a distance, a look I tried to dismiss as wedding jitters. Then, I caught sight of his mother, Betty, whispering to a guest, her face tinged with a hint of disapproval. When our eyes met, she forced a smile, mouthing, "You look beautiful," though her eyes betrayed her insincerity. My heart sank, but I pushed the feeling aside, focusing on the moment. During the ceremony, when the pastor asked Tyler if he would take me as his wife, he paused. The words "I do" finally came, yet his eyes lacked the warmth I'd always felt from him. In the ring exchange, Betty abruptly stood up, announcing she needed to capture the moment. Her tone felt more cautionary than celebratory. Later, at the reception, she made a remark about my unconventional dress, hinting I was defying tradition. I laughed it off, replying that I saw our wedding as a celebration of love, not of strict customs. Tyler tried to smooth things over, but his words felt heavy, as if carrying a weight of resignation. As we danced our first dance, our bodies were close, yet our spirits felt miles apart. The song that was meant to symbolize our love now seemed like a hollow echo, and when Tyler whispered, "Are you ready for forever?" the vastness between us felt overwhelming. I replied, trying to shake the dark cloud lingering over us. But deep down, I sensed something had already shifted, even as friends and family toasted to our new beginning. When we returned to our cozy home, the place I had once envisioned as our sanctuary, it felt strangely foreboding. The walls that I thought would safeguard our happiness now seemed like the bars of a cage, foreshadowing an uncertain future. Soon after, Betty began her subtle but steady invasion, showing up unannounced, her criticisms filling the spaces I had hoped to keep peaceful. One day, without warning, Betty declared that she would be moving in indefinitely, claiming my cherished reading nook as her own. Shocked, I pulled Tyler aside, my voice trembling. "Tyler, this is our home. Shouldn't we discuss something this big together?" He met my gaze, but the warmth I had once known was gone. "Mom's getting older," he said. "She shouldn't be alone. She needs to be with family." "So, I'm not family." The words escaped before I could stop them, my voice laced with hurt. "That's not what I meant," he replied, his frustration rising. "Mom has done so much for me. I owe her this." "What about what we owe each other?" I pleaded. "We just got married. This should be our time to build something together." But my words seemed to fall on deaf ears. The decision had already been made. Betty moved in, and the love that was supposed to fill our home was replaced with tension and resentment. Every corner I once found peace in felt heavy, occupied by her constant presence. The moments of warmth I dreamed of were slowly replaced by a sense of suffocation, and each day felt like a new challenge in a house that no longer felt like home. I used to share everything with Tyler, but now I found myself not just fighting to save my marriage or reclaim my home, but battling to preserve my identity, dignity, and peace of mind. The question kept echoing in my mind. How did it come to this? How did my life, my choices, become secondary to someone else's whims? What used to be my peaceful reading nook had transformed into a cluttered space filled with Betty's belongings. The kitchen, once a place of warmth and creativity, became a battleground for her constant critiques. And Tyler, the man I thought I'd grow old with, now seemed like a stranger, aligned with the opposition. This was only the beginning. If I thought life had been tough before, I had no idea what was coming. The atmosphere at home grew stifling, oppressive, as if the walls themselves were closing in on me. Amid this escalating tension, I found myself staring at 2 blue lines on a pregnancy test in my trembling hands. It should have been a moment of joy, a milestone to celebrate, but under the weight of everything, the news of my first pregnancy felt more like an additional burden than a blessing. Standing before the bathroom mirror, my eyes red from holding back tears, I realized that this should have been a moment of excitement. But it had become a heavy weight I wasn't ready for. When I shared the news with Tyler, his reaction was disappointing in its indifference. "Well, that's something," he muttered, barely looking up from his phone before quickly shifting the conversation to some home improvement idea his mother had suggested. Betty, however, embraced my pregnancy as though it were her divine calling. She began to dictate every aspect of my life, what I ate, what I did, and even where I should give birth. Her interference didn't stop with advice. She turned my pregnancy into another arena for her to assert control. "You're eating again," she would remark, eyeing the modest sandwich I prepared. "Shouldn't you be careful about gaining weight during pregnancy?" I tried to remain calm. "This is doctor recommended, Betty." She scoffed. "Doctors these days don't know anything. Back in my day, we knew how to manage pregnancies." As the weeks went on, my energy dwindled, but Betty's demands only escalated. She transformed my home into her kingdom, where I was expected to cook, clean, and cater to her every whim, as though I were a servant, not a pregnant daughter-in-law. "Betty, why haven't you vacuumed the living room yet?" she barked from her self-appointed throne in what used to be my cherished reading nook, now turned into her lair for endless phone scrolling and daytime TV marathons. "I've been feeling really tired today, Betty. The doctor advised me to take it easy," I replied, my voice heavy with exhaustion. "Tiredness during pregnancy isn't an illness, you know," she shot back, her words cold and dismissive. Through all of this, Tyler's silence was deafening. His passive compliance only added fuel to the growing tension. Things finally boiled over during a tense dinner when Betty criticized my choice of baby names. "That's a ridiculous name for a child," she sneered. "You might as well pin a kick me sign on his back for his entire school life." At my breaking point, I snapped. "Enough is enough, Betty. This is my child, and I have a say in how to raise him or her." Her eyes flared with anger, and her voice escalated. Tyler, as always, intervened, not in my favor. "Mom, you're being emotional. She's just giving her opinion," he said, looking between Betty and me, then around the house, which had become my prison. I felt trapped, humiliated, isolated. The reflection in my tarnished wedding ring showed a woman I barely recognized, someone who was losing everything that once defined her. My home, my dignity, and my relentless spirit had all been slowly eroded under the weight of constant conflict. During one of these heated family discussions, Betty, with a cold, triumphant tone, looked me dead in the eyes and declared, "If you can't handle a simple family discussion, maybe you shouldn't be a part of this family." Tyler's silence in that moment was more cutting than any harsh words. It sliced through me, leaving me with a deep, aching emptiness. I realized then that my nightmare wasn't looming on the horizon. It had already consumed me, turning my life into a maze of broken dreams and suffocated cries. I wandered through the house like a ghost, each room echoing with the absence of the warmth they once held. The baby growing inside me became my only beacon of hope, the last bit of joy in a life that was quickly becoming hollow. But even that small solace was under threat. The breaking point came on a cold evening. During one of those dreadful family dinners thick with tension, I had spent hours preparing the meal, bracing myself for Betty's inevitable criticisms. Each of her jabs felt like a sharp sting, each scoff like a slap to the face. I'd grown used to it, but this time her words hit deeper than ever. "You think you're fit to be a mother if you can't even manage a household? What are you going to do with a baby?" she sneered, each word aimed like a piercing attack at my already fragile self-esteem. My hands shook, and tears blurred my vision, but before I could respond, Tyler added to my despair. "Mom has a point. Betty's right, you need to step it up. We're going to be parents soon." That was the last straw. A surge of anger, mixed with years of resentment and humiliation, rushed through me. "Step it up. Step it up," I exclaimed, my voice rising with a fierce intensity I hadn't expected. "I am carrying our child, managing our home, and enduring relentless emotional abuse from your mother, and you're telling me to step it up." Both Tyler and Betty looked stunned by the force of my outburst. In that moment, the reality of my situation hit me full force. The profound isolation, the deep disrespect. It was all laid bare, unyielding, and stark. Every day, I faced the unbearable tension within what was supposed to be the sanctuary of my own home. It had built up like a dormant volcano, simmering beneath the surface until it finally erupted. "I'm done. I can't do this anymore," I declared, my voice breaking under the weight of it all. "I won't raise my child in a place where their mother is treated like nothing. If this is what family is to you, then I want no part of it." With those words, I stood up from the dinner table, leaving Tyler and Betty in stunned silence. I quickly packed a small bag, my hands shaking so violently that I struggled with the simple task of turning the doorknob. It was then that Betty, sensing her last chance to strike, decided to deliver what she thought would be the final blow. "Where do you think you're going? This is Tyler's house, not yours," she sneered. I turned to face her, meeting her gaze with unwavering resolve. "Actually, Betty, this house is mine. I bought it, and I have every right to decide who stays and who leaves." "Don't do this. Let's talk about it," Tyler pleaded, his voice desperate, finally understanding the gravity of the situation. "There's nothing left to talk about," I replied, tears streaming down my face as I opened the door to the cold night outside. As I stepped out into the night, I felt the finality of the moment settle in. The door closing behind me felt like the end of a long, tragic chapter in my life. I started walking, each step away from that house a painful, necessary one. I didn't know where I was headed, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of agency over my own fate. Despite the emotional toll, the icy wind cut through my thin clothes, biting into my skin as sharply as the turmoil inside me. I walked aimlessly, lost in a haze of exhaustion, both physical and emotional, until I neared my parents' house, a sanctuary I desperately needed. Just steps away from safety, my foot caught on an uneven slab of pavement, sending me crashing to the ground. My ankle twisted painfully, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional agony I had been enduring. Limping and tearful, I finally reached my parents' doorstep. Their shocked expressions as they opened the door reflected the gravity of what had happened. This breakdown had been a long overdue fracture in a life already strained by too much pressure. As they hurried me to the hospital, I knew deep down that things couldn't go back to the way they were. I couldn't return to that house, not to Tyler, and certainly not to the oppressive shadow of Betty that had suffocated me for so long. Reaching my breaking point wasn't just the end. It marked the beginning of something new, a harsh but necessary step toward regaining the life that had been slowly stripped away from me. In the sterile hospital room, surrounded by the constant beeping of machines and the cold, unfeeling walls, reality hit hard. My sprained ankle propped up and undergoing checks for any complications from the fall, I experienced a strange blend of relief and fear. My parents stood beside me, their faces etched with concern and quiet anger. They had always sensed something was wrong in my marriage, but now the full extent of its dysfunction was glaringly obvious. "Sweetheart, what are you going to do now?" my mom asked, breaking the heavy silence, her voice heavy with worry. "I don't know, Mom," I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil still swirling inside me. "But what I do know is that I can't go back. Not now, not ever." My dad, who had been pacing the room, paused and turned to face me. "Your mother and I will support whatever decision you make," he said, his voice calm yet heavy with concern. "But you need to think about your future, and the future of your child." I nodded, my mind a labyrinth of uncertainty, filled with countless possible paths, each shadowed by doubt, but also touched by the promise of something new, something free. As we spoke, my phone buzzed with a message from Tyler. "Betty, where are you? We need to talk." Without a second thought, I turned off my phone. Whatever Tyler had to say, it was too little, too late. I was done with words. Now, it was time for action. My first decisive step was to pick up the phone and call a family lawyer. With my parents beside me, we laid out the details of divorce proceedings, child custody, and alimony. There was something clinical, even cold, about turning the end of a marriage into legal documents. But it also gave me a sense of power, control over a future I had almost forgotten I could choose for myself. For the first time, I was taking charge of my life, prioritizing my well-being and that of my unborn child. A week later, Tyler and Betty were served with divorce papers. This wasn't just about ending a marriage, it was about reclaiming my independence, about forging a future where I could breathe freely, unencumbered by the shadows of a toxic relationship. Along with the divorce papers, my lawyer filed a notice of eviction against Tyler and Betty from the house that was legally mine. It was a bold move, but necessary. The paperwork also included demands for child support and compensation for the emotional toll I had endured. It was severe, but it was a firm severance of the toxic ties that had held me captive for far too long. When I finally turned my phone back on, it was flooded with messages and missed calls from Tyler. "Betty, please can we talk about this? I didn't realize how bad things had gotten. I'm sorry, Betty. I never wanted any of this to happen. Let's find a way to make it right." For a moment, I hesitated. I was tempted to reply, to hear him out. But then memories of all those nights filled with humiliation, years of emotional neglect, and Betty's ceaseless cruelty came rushing back. Any affection I had once felt for him was buried under the rubble of our shattered marriage. Without another thought, I deleted the messages, erased his number, and blocked him on every social media platform. As far as I was concerned, Tyler was now a chapter of my past, one I was finally ready to close. I knew the road ahead would be hard. Divorce proceedings are never simple, especially when children are involved. But for the first time in ages, I felt a sense of control. The journey ahead would be painful, yes, but it would also be mine to navigate. The darkness was finally behind me, and though the future was uncertain, it held the promise of something better. The courtroom was sterile and cold, its atmosphere heavy with finality. My lawyer sat beside me, exuding calm confidence. Behind me, my parents' support was unwavering. Across the room, Tyler sat, looking defeated, his face a mask of bewilderment. Betty stood beside him, her expression one of indignant disbelief. "All rise," the bailiff called, and Judge Anthony entered. The proceedings unfolded quickly, like a storm on leaves. Lies were exposed, facts and accusations laid bare. Evidence of Betty's emotional abuse and Tyler's neglect was presented. I watched their faces, twisted with shock and perhaps regret, as they saw themselves through the eyes of the law for the first time. The judge turned to Betty. "Miss, you stayed accused of emotional abuse and harassment. The evidence against you is overwhelming. How do you plead?" Betty faltered, her usual confidence nowhere to be found. "Your Honor, this has all been taken out of context. I was merely looking out for my son's well-being." The judge, unimpressed, retorted, "It appears your definition of well-being is quite twisted." After a brief but intense deliberation, Judge Anthony rendered the verdict. "The court hereby grants Betty a full divorce from Tyler. Custody of the unborn child will be awarded solely to Betty. Tyler, you are required to pay child support as determined by the state. Mrs. Betty, given the evidence of your emotional abuse and harassment, you are fined $300,000 for your actions." A wave of relief washed over me as the gavel came down, but it was a bittersweet victory. My marriage had ended not in dramatic confrontations, but in the quiet shuffle of legal documents. I was free, but the cost was higher than I had ever imagined. As we exited the courtroom, Tyler approached me, his expression full of confusion and regret. "Betty, I'm so sorry. I never thought we'd end up here." I looked at him, this man I had once believed I would spend my entire life with, and felt nothing but an empty void where love had once resided. "I didn't think so either, Tyler. But here we are. It's too late for apologies now." I turned my back on him and walked away. Betty tried to catch my eye as I passed, perhaps seeking some form of recognition or even forgiveness. But I offered her nothing. She had drained me, and I couldn't afford to give her the satisfaction of knowing she still had any effect on me. As I stepped out of the courthouse, the world felt different, brighter, more vivid, as if I was seeing everything through a new lens. The weight that had held me down for so long had finally been lifted. This was the beginning of a new chapter, one I would write on my own terms. My mother embraced me tightly, tears in her eyes. "You did it, Betty. You're free." I hugged her back, overwhelmed with gratitude. "I couldn't have gone through this without you and Dad." Together, we walked into the light of a new day, ready to start fresh, free from the shadows of the past. "We'll always be here for you," my dad said, joining in the hug, his voice steady and reassuring. "And for your new beginning." That evening, I sat alone in the quiet of my house, the house that was now undeniably mine. For the first time in years, I felt a profound sense of peace. I wasn't lonely, I was alone, and that was enough. The only expectations I needed to meet were my own. A flicker of apprehension remained, of course. I was about to become a single mother, a responsibility that loomed large. But as I rested my hand on my belly, feeling the gentle movements of my unborn child, a sense of calm settled over me. This painful journey had led me to a reckoning, but it had also brought me to a place of survival. The scars from my past remained, but they now told a story of strength, not defeat. I was ready for whatever the future held, not out of necessity, but from a place of choice. And that choice, to steer my own life, to shape my destiny, made all the difference. This was the promise of a new chapter, one written with hope, resilience, and newfound freedom.